Welcome to the first episode of the virtual tween baking program that I'm doing. I hope you guys found this video okay, and I hope you are ready to bake along with me and make some olive oil focaccia bread today. This stuff is really good. It's, I mean, you can do many different variations of it, but the one that we're doing today is pretty simple. There's a couple optional add-ins if you want to do a little cheese or garlic or anything like that, but you can kind of make it your own. So I'm going to walk you through the steps, and we're going to bake through this together. So to start off, I want to just go through everything that came in the kit that I prepared for you guys. So again, this is for olive oil focaccia. So of course we are going to need, actually I'll just go right down the ingredients list. You should have in your kit 3 tablespoons of salt in a little container. You should have 4 cups of all-purpose flour. And I have pre-measured all of this stuff for you guys, so, I mean, you really don't even need measuring cups. I did the measuring part for you. You need 5 tablespoons of olive oil for the dough, and then you're going to need more olive oil for the finishing. So altogether, you're going to need 8 tablespoons of olive oil, which I put in this container for you. You are going to need 2 teaspoons of yeast, which we have here. And finally, the only thing for the dough that I didn't include is warm water. So at home, if you guys want to prepare 1 2/3 cups of warm water, I'll leave that to you. That is one of the only things you have to measure yourself for this recipe. For the finishing, some add-ins you can do are some more olive oil, which is included in this little container here. And I'll explain to you how to kind of separate that out as we go. You're going to need a little bit more salt, which is also included in this. We've got some optional Italian herbs here, and then we've got some optional garlic powder here. And finally, at the end, if you choose to sprinkle some Parmesan cheese on top, we've got that also, if you like that, or you can choose to omit that if you don't like it. And this kit comes with a nice disposable pan, but this is really nice, just that way that we're all being consistent with the same pan that we're using, and this is the same one you guys have in your kit, so I will be using this one also. So I am going to just kind of go down the steps, step by step, and walk you through the recipe, and we will, when we're finished, we will have a beautiful pan of crispy, herby, cheesy olive oil focaccia bread. So let's get started. All right, you guys, so for the first step, according to our little recipe instruction sheet here, step number 1 is to prepare the dough in a large bowl, which I have right here. We are going to stir in 2 teaspoons of salt and 4 cups of flour. Then we are going to rub in 5 tablespoons of oil with our hands, and we're going to make sure it's all evenly absorbed. So I'm going to take my 4 cups of flour that I put for you in this bag. And again, it's pre-measured, and we're just going to dump it into a nice big bowl here. All right, there's our 4 cups of flour. And then we are going to add in 2 teaspoons of salt. This little container I gave you has 3 teaspoons. You're going to want to save about 1 teaspoon for the end. So you're going to add about 2/3 of this little container. It doesn't have to be exact. You should just kind of eyeball it. About 2/3 here of what I gave you. So I'm going to kind of shake that in. And there, I've got about a teaspoon left here. And we'll put the teaspoon left aside for a later step. So far we've got our 4 cups of flour and 2 teaspoons of salt. And now we are going to rub in with our hands 5 tablespoons of olive oil. So again, I put the olive oil in these little containers for you. This is 8 tablespoons of olive oil. We're going to want 5 tablespoons in this mixture right now. So that's basically, you're just going to add a little bit more than half. Again, it doesn't have to be super duper exact. We'll be saving about 3 teaspoons of olive oil, again, for later to kind of coat the top with. So we're going to add a little bit more than half of what's in this container. I'm going to coat my hands a little bit with this, and then I'm going to pour in a little bit more than half here. That should be good. I'm left with about 3 tablespoons. And again, I'm coating my hands with oil, and I am just going to mix it right in with my hands. You want it all evenly distributed here. You want the moisture to be kind of even throughout. Okay. So we're just kind of working on step one here. We're getting this oil all throughout. You don't want any majorly big clumps in here. I'm kind of just taking it, sifting the flour through my fingers, trying to get that oil worked in the best I can evenly. All right. And the oil on your hands will, hopefully keep anything from really clumping and sticking to your hands. You're going to get a little bit of flour on your hands, of course, but it's going to keep anything from, any big clumps from sticking to your hands because it's nice and slick. Okay, so we're just kind of working in this oil, this olive oil, with our hands. Just like this. I can smell the olive oil. This has such a nice flavor when it's all done. It's kind of like an Italian bread. It's a little thicker than like a flat bread. It's really crispy though when it comes out because of all the oil we're putting in it. And you can do so many cool things with it. You can make breadsticks, you can make sandwiches, you can just kind of eat it plain as like a side dish. So a very versatile recipe. All right, I'd say at this point, my flour has little tiny clumps of oil kind of evenly distributed throughout. There's no, big balls of oil or anything like that. It kind of is the consistency and like it kind of visually looks kind of just like a very light sand. And we're going to be mixing this more later. So, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. This recipe is really nice because you have some room for error, and that's one of the reasons I chose this one as the first recipe we're doing because, I'm not with you in person, so I figure, we're all going to do things a little bit differently, but this recipe is kind of forgiving, so you can kind of experiment a little bit, the way you're mixing it, that kind of thing, and it's still going to turn out good, I promise. All right, so there is our dough with our olive oil mixed in. Let's move on now to step 2. Okay, we are moving on to step 2. So now in another container, I have this liquid measuring cup. This thing's really awesome because it tells you, if you're filling it with liquid, it tells you exactly how much you have in there. So in a liquid measuring cup, you want to add 1 2/3 cup of warm water. For this water, you don't want it really, really hot because it's going to kill the yeast. You don't want that, so you want pretty warm water. So again, 1 2/3 cup of warm water, and then we are going to add our 2 teaspoons of yeast that I gave you in this little container here. So I am just going to pour that right in the water, and I'm going to take a whisk. You can use a fork if you want, but we're just going to kind of evenly mix that in. There we go. And this is going to kind of activate our yeast a little bit. And it makes kind of this cloudy, milky looking substance. And again, you can use a whisk, you can use a fork, anything you have. So that is our the beginning of step 2, which was to mix the yeast into the warm water. Then we are going to use a large rubber spatula to stir in this mixture into that big bowl of flour, salt, and oil that we prepared in the first step. With this recipe, again, it's really easy. You don't really have to wait for the yeast to like bubble or foam or anything like that. We're just going to pretty much take our big bowl of flour here that we prepared with the oil and the salt. We're going to dump it in. Like that. You want to make sure you get as much, sometimes the yeast likes to collect in the bottom of whatever container you're using. Try to get out as much of that yeast mixture as you can. All right, and now we are going to use a spatula. A rubber spatula works really well for this. And we are going to stir our mixture to make sure the dough gets nice and hydrated. And it's going to form a slightly kind of shaggy dough. It's not going to be perfectly smooth. But again, this recipe, we're not asking for perfection here. We're just trying to hydrate this dough and make it kind of evenly hydrated all throughout. So I'm just kind of stirring. You'll see I'm scraping the sides of my bowl with my spatula. That's why rubber spatulas work really well. They're kind of bendy, so you can scrape the bottom of the bowl, scrape the sides of the bowl, make sure everything's getting nice nice and mixed in there. And this kind of shaggy dough is starting to form. It's kind of a thicker dough. And I'm just kind of scraping and pressing. I'm sort of kneading it like with my spatula, kind of scraping and pressing, doing kind of like a swish and press motion. And if you need to, which I'm about to do, you can kind of use your hands to just kind of gently press in any excess dry flour, kind of press it into this more hydrated dough ball. Sometimes the dry flour likes to collect on the bottom of the bowl or on the side. We just want to make sure it's all kind of evenly incorporated in here. So I'm just kind of pressing and smushing this around, making sure all the flour is going to form into this nice ball. And again, it's not going to be, you know, perfectly smooth. It doesn't have to be. But we do want to try to get all the dry ingredients in one ball. That's what we're going for here. Okay. Almost done. You can see I've got this ball. It's kind of coming together here. Not too much other loose dry ingredients in my bowl. And you do want to use kind of a larger bowl for this because we are going to let this dough, for the next step, we are going to let it rise. Because we put yeast in it, it's going to poof up. So we basically want it to kind of double in size when we let it proof. So here's what I'm going to do. I've got my bowl here with my dough ball. That's pretty much all come together now. And again, I'm just kind of smushing this, making sure there's no stray dry bits in the bowl. And in the end, I'm left with kind of this, just this solid dough ball. And you can see it's not perfectly smooth. Like I said, doesn't have to be. We're going to put it in our bowl like this. And now we are going to move on to step number 3. For step number 3, you will need some plastic wrap. I did not include that in the kit, but I figured most people have plastic wrap at home. If you don't have plastic wrap, you can use tin foil. You can even, if you need to, cover this with kind of like a damp cloth. But plastic wrap, I find, you know, works really well. It kind of keeps everything out of there. So I've got my dough ball here. I'll just jump right into step 3, which is cover the bowl with plastic wrap and let the dough rise at room temperature until it has doubled in bulk. So we want this to get basically twice as big as it is now. So that's covered. I'm going to take some plastic wrap here. If I can get it, my fingers are a little doughy. All right. And we are going to cover our bowl. And this part's kind of fun because, I mean, it could take maybe an hour and an a half. My kitchen's pretty warm, but it's fun to watch and kind of, you know, as time lapses, watch the dough poof up. So hopefully what I'm going to do is set my camera up and see if I can get a time lapse of this dough poofing up until it's doubled in size. And then we will move on to the next step. Right, so here we have our dough, our giant dough ball that is now doubled in size. It's really big, it's really round, it's very soft and springy to the touch. That's kind of what you're looking for. So before we start working with that, we are going to move on to step number 4. So we have our pan right here. And what we're going to do, so that when we add the dough to the pan so it doesn't stick, we're just going to add a little splash of oil to this pan and spread it around with our hands. And that will keep the dough from sticking, and it'll also help make it nice and crispy in the pan. So here's that about 3 tablespoons of olive oil that we reserved. We're going to take just a little bit and kind of drizzle it in there, and we are still going to be saving whatever is left to kind of drizzle on top of the dough later. So just a little splash, a little drizzle in the pan. Take your clean hands, you're just going to rub it right around in your pan. And you can get your hands nice and oily because we'll be working with the dough in the next step. And if your hands have oil on them, the dough won't stick to your hands as easily. So this is kind of doing two steps. You're kind of oiling the pan and getting your hands nice and oily for when you're about to work with the dough. So where I'm just kind of evenly coating the pan, the edges here. All right, so there's our olive oil in our pan. And so now our dough has doubled in size. I am going to take it. You can use a spatula for this part, or if you want to use your now oiled hands, you can just kind of gently get it out of the bowl here and gently transfer it to your pan. It all came out. Put that bowl aside. And now what we're going to do is just kind of press it into our pan like this. If your dough is too springy, I put a little note in the recipe. If the dough resists and it springs back and it won't let you press it out evenly into the pan, just let it sit a little bit, let it loosen up a little bit, and then you should be able to kind of work with it a little bit easier. But my dough feels pretty soft. It feels pretty easy to work with. So what I'm doing is just gently kind of pressing it into my pan right here. And you want to get it all the way to the corners. We're just pressing and pressing. We're making a nice even layer of dough in this oiled up pan. And this is why it's important to have nice oily hands. It just helps the dough from sticking to your hands. All right, so I've just about got it nice and oiled here, or nice and pressed into the pan. Okay, so like I said, if your dough is a little too tight, a little too springy, just let it sit. Mine seemed to be really easy to work with, easy to press down, so I made it into a nice kind of evenly distributed layer into this pan. And now what we're going to do is let it rise again. So we are going to take another piece of plastic wrap, and this time you're going to want to either oil or spray your plastic wrap. So there's my plastic wrap. I've got some cooking spray here. I'm just going to kind of lightly spray a layer onto my plastic wrap. I'm going to put it on top of my dough there. And we're going to let this sit. We're now on step 5. We're going to let this sit for about 30 minutes. And it's going to kind of rise a little bit more in that time, okay? This is kind of part of step 6 also, but we're going to let this sit for 30 minutes. About 15 minutes into letting this rest, we are going to set our ovens to 425 degrees and make sure the rack is at on the lower. We want to use the lower rack in our oven for this. So in about 15 minutes, while this continues to rise, I'm going to preheat my oven to 425, make sure my rack is at the bottom, and then I will check back in with you guys. All right, so 30 minutes has passed. And like I said, about 15 minutes in, I set the oven to 425 and made sure the rack we're going to use is on the lowest it can go in the oven. So now is the fun part. Our dough that's been sitting here has risen a little bit more because we were letting it rest. And now we're going to take off our plastic wrap, and you can see why we oiled it. Some of the dough did cling to the wrap a little bit, but this helps it just kind of, you can pull it right away since we oiled it. And now we are left with this dough that is ready for us to do a few more things to. So now we are on step number 7. We are going to take clean hands, and we are going to just poke indents all over this dough. We're just going to press it down about 1 inch to 1.5 inches, little dots all over this. And then we'll go from there. So I'm just going to, what I'm going to do is dip my finger in a little bit of this extra oil that we reserved. And I'm just going to start poking about 1 inch apart, little indents in this dough. And you can see there, that's kind of what I'm going to do over the entire thing. And like I always say, this really doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to make it exactly 1 inch apart. Just kind of make little dots all over. And actually having the oiled finger does help a lot, so the dough won't stick to your hand. And I'm just poking and poking and making these indents all over my dough. And this dough right now is very soft, very easy to work with. So these little indents are holding their shape really well. And I'd say that's pretty good. So that's what I did. I've got little kind of indents all over my dough. And this dough, like, it's because this pan is so oily, it's sliding around a little bit when I show the camera. But you guys can see that's kind of what we're going for there. Those little indents all over. Okay, so now we are going to do some different add-ons, whatever extra things we want to do here. And this part's kind of optional, but I included everything in your kits if you want to add this stuff. So we have garlic powder you can add, we have Italian herbs, a little bit of that salt left over, and then the remainder of our oil. Like I said, I included these in your kits, but you don't have to use all of them. You can use half of the herbs I gave you or all the herbs I gave you. You can use all of the garlic powder I gave you or no garlic powder. This part's up to you depending on what you want to taste with your finished focaccia bread. So what I'm going to do is take my remaining oil and just kind of evenly drizzle it on top of my dough here. There we go. And it should kind of pool and puddle in those little indents that you made with your finger. That's what you want it to do. I'm just kind of spreading, if there was any spots the oil kind of missed, I'm just kind of gently spreading it around. So it's kind of evenly distributed all over this dough now. And again, it's got little pools and pockets in those little indents we made. Now for mine, I'm going to add a little bit more salt. I'm not going to add all of it. You can if you want. You probably only need a little sprinkle, but it's up to you. Little sprinkle of salt on there. I'm going to add these Italian herbs. Ooh, they smell really good. And this will smell really nice when it's baking also. So I'm going to take these herbs and I'm just going to kind of sprinkle them on top. I probably will add pretty much all of these. I love the flavor of these. I think there's probably some basil in here, some thyme, maybe a little bit of oregano, just kind of judging by what I'm smelling. All right, so there's my herb, and I really like garlic, so I'm gonna add some of this garlic powder also. I'm gonna pour it in my hand and just kind of evenly sprinkle over what the amount that I want. I'm just gonna evenly sprinkle it over until it kind of hits the corners and the center, and we get some nice coverage here of this garlic powder. So I already know, like I said, this is gonna smell awesome. So I use pretty much all of that garlic powder. The only thing we have left that we haven't used yet is this little thing of Parmesan cheese. After this comes out of the oven, that's when I'm gonna sprinkle the Parmesan on it. But again, that part is optional, but I think it tastes really nice. It kind of reminds me of breadsticks. That flavor of like the herbs and the cheese at the end. But again, totally optional depending on your taste and what you like. So let's see, that was step number 8. We did the oil and then all the add-ins. And now we are going to put this on the bottom rack that we prepared in our 425 degree oven. And we are going to bake it for about 30 minutes. We want it to get nice and golden brown on top. So I might pop my head in and check it a few times. But what we're looking for is a nice, oily, golden brown top to this dough. And I'm really excited. I can't wait to smell this. I can't wait to see the finished product. So I'm going to pop this in the oven now. And I will check back in when it is ready to come out. This is what mine looks like. Oh, it's dripping a little bit. This is what mine looks like right now. So we'll check back in 30 minutes and see what it looks like. Okay, you guys, 30 minutes has passed, and I think the focaccia bread is ready. I'm about to pull it out of the oven for the big reveal, so hang right there. I'm gonna grab it. Woo! Oh my gosh. Okay, so first of all, this smells amazing. My entire house right now smells just like Italian herbs and like garlic. Oh my gosh, this smells and looks so good. So you can see it's got some golden brown on top. I'm just gonna check the bottom of it to make sure that's nice and crispy. Also, it has a little bit of color to it. Oh yeah, this looks great. So, what I'm going to do, and this is a part for an adult to do because this is really hot. Obviously, it just came out of an over 400-degree oven. I'm going to slide this on to a cooling rack, like so. Put my pan aside. Can you see that steam coming off? Oh my gosh, this is so exciting. This looks awesome. There's our focaccia bread. The last step, and again, this is optional, is I'm going to sprinkle some Parmesan cheese over my bread, like so. Oh wow, this looks great. I'm happy I put all those herbs on there. It smells so good. And again, you don't have to use all of this cheese, but you can, because I'm going to. This looks great. So this is, if you let this cool for a little bit, it's best to eat it while it's warm, definitely. But again, you can also, you can see it's thick enough where when it's cool, if you did want to, you know, cut a square, slice it, you can also make kind of like a panini or a sandwich with it. I like to cut it into strips and dip it in like marinara sauce, kind of like breadsticks. That's awesome. You can probably like put sauce and cheese and you know, like pepperoni on it, make kind of a pizza with it. Like there's so many different things you can do. But like I said, I recommend trying it while it is warm because, oh my gosh, there's nothing like, you know, fresh bread out of the oven. So here is my finished focaccia bread. It's still steaming, so I'm not gonna cut into it quite yet, but it's, you can kind of hear it. It's nice and crispy. It has that golden brown color. And it was a really easy recipe. You guys saw me do the whole thing. The hardest part, basically, at this point is just waiting for it to cool. Other than that, it's just like lightly mixing things, waiting for it to proof, pressing it in a pan, and you're pretty much good to go. So it's pretty foolproof. I would love to see any pictures of your finished bread that you made. I would love to hear your feedback. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm gonna let this cool and hopefully not drop it. I'm gonna let this cool and cut into it, and then I will enjoy it. And I hope you guys enjoy yours also. Thank you for watching the video. Thank you for baking along with me. And I will see you next time for virtual baking. Bye.